It is Thursday, February 25th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schaff. Jared Smola is not with me this week. He's on the sideline. He's hard at work on a special project for the first time in probably ever. We're going to be posting our season projections and turning on the MVP board in early March. That's right. No NFL draft yet. No free agency yet. A whole lot is going to change. But if you're out there drafting best ball teams, then we're here to help you. So make sure you're a DS Insider. You can take advantage of that. In place of Jared tonight, though, I have a guest riding shotgun with me. If you're an FFPC veteran watching us on Thursday, then you probably already know who he is. He is the creator of FantasyMojo.com. He's the creator of the annual Pros vs. Joes tournament that many of us take part in. He is at Fantasy Mojo on Twitter. He is Darren Armani in real life. Darren, thanks very much for joining me tonight.
Hey, Matt. It's good to be back. I think I was on here like 3 weeks ago. I think we were going over the invitational
Yep.
league that you talked about last time. So yeah, but we got a new season, and things are already kicking off. So I've already done a handful of drafts. So I got some fresh data that I can share with you guys.
That's right. That's where we're going to be mining for tonight. But as people who might be familiar with the area can probably tell, Darren is a Philly guy. I have some Philly roots. Went to high school down there. So Darren, I know that we're all still kind of reacting to the Carson Wentz fallout. What's it like for you as an Eagles fan? And are people just like crying in the streets around you?
I don't know, like around here, there's always people complaining. Like nobody's ever happy with the quarterback situation anyway. So, but I guess it's good that they kind of resolve that sooner than later if that's the way they were going to go, rather than have it drag through, you know, camp and whatnot. And if it is kind of just like they did, it's funny. They always try to they like to consider themselves like we're the gold standard, but they're always getting 50 cents on a dollar on their investments. It's not like it's like at the end of the day they're not looking that great.
It seems
Um,
like it wasn't that long ago that this looked like one of the best run organizations in the NFL. I mean, within the past 3 years, at least, it seemed like it. It seemed like they were in great shape. And now all of a sudden, it's a mess. I mean, maybe I just didn't see the early signs of it, but it looks like a mess all of a sudden.
yeah, they mixed in a Super Bowl, which is good, but I mean, ever since Andy Reid left, it's been sort of a bumpy ride. The whole Chip Kelly thing was a disaster. And then in retrospect, for a guy who won you a Super Bowl, that kind of dissolved pretty quickly. Although what I heard was it was sort of more driven by Peterson. He wanted out, so
Mm.
that's what I kind of heard. So, but anyway, so we got another guy, and I don't know too much about him. He's probably more of a company guy. So maybe that's what they want at this point, and we'll see. But it looks like they're going to roll with Hurts unless they do something crazy in the draft. Which I mean, just they kind of got themselves into this predicament by drafting another quarterback when they didn't necessarily need it. If they do that again, that would really kind of blow my mind. Um, but with that number 6 pick, I don't, we'll see what they do. It always surprises me in the draft what these guys do.
Yeah, I mean, they could do anything. It wouldn't shock me if they took a quarterback. It wouldn't shock me if they're not interested in a quarterback there. As a fantasy player, I hated them taking Jalen Hurts in the second round last year. We'll see. I wish that we could see what this story looked like at this point if they hadn't drafted Jalen Hurts. I mean, I refuse to believe that Carson Wentz was fine and then just melted because they drafted a second round quarterback. I think that things were going to go poorly anyway, but who knows if that accelerated it? Who knows if that made the relationship worse behind the scenes? I don't know. It'd be nice if we could see a different version, but this is what we got. I agree with you that once we saw this offseason things were not going to get resolved, there was a new coach and there was still no rosy words from or about Carson Wentz. We could tell that he was going somewhere. So it's nice that he went to a good organization. It's nice that Jalen Hurts is there as a backup plan. And it's nice that they have the 6th overall pick to play around with, whether it's a quarterback or not.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they always said. They said it was Frank Reich who played a big role in his sort of his success when he was flying high. So well, now he's back with him. So we'll see if that's truly the case or not, or maybe his injuries caught up with him and he just didn't bounce back. He looked really good at the beginning and then he just kind of like went downhill. So yeah, we'll see how he. I mean, nobody around here really has bad feelings towards him. Um, so you know, best of luck to him.
Mhm.
You know, so we'll see what happens. It's kind of I guess a bit of a rebuild or a shakeup with purging a lot of the old guard from the Super Bowl. Probably not. I don't even know who's left at this point. So.
Well, we'll see how the season goes for Wentz. We'll see whether Jalen Hurts is a starting quarterback. For now, there are a couple of quarterbacks that we're considering in these drafts, and we're going to get into that drafting. I know you said you've done some. I've certainly been doing some best ball drafting already. Before we get to that, though, let's talk a little bit about Fantasy Mojo. When did you create Fantasy Mojo, and what motivated you to do so?
Actually, when I created Fantasy Mojo back in 2009, and really what it was it didn't really have much to do with FFPC. What I had done was I had created some tools for myself, some web-based tools to to create one of the big things I provide on my site is these colorized draft boards of basically every FFPC draft, and it's nice to have. But originally, what I did was I created these for my fantasy leagues that I was in, because they didn't provide that. All they had was like kind of the static, pages for drafts, and I can't really follow that when I'm doing a draft. I need the colorized board. Um, so that was kind of the first tools that I rolled out, and then when Pros versus Joes came along, that was 2009. That's when I kind of started to incorporate FFPC content, and it's just sort of flourished over the years. First I was just including league history from the past season's results, um, for those guys, and then started to do some of the ADP and then the waiver wires and the draft boards, and now I've got contest specific content. I do a lot around the football guys, and I do sort of, a lot of tools and analytics around specific, for the football guys and for the main event and for the playoff challenge. And I'm able to dig into the data that they have and just really, because I always did it as a player. I'm not one of these guys who's just like a tech guy and I'm just building out tools for a site. These are the things that I was using. So I'm really, tied into like what does the fantasy player need to help him draft and manage his team as he goes through the season. So that's what these are. These are the tools that I use, and I just kind of put them out there for other people to use. And they're kind of specialized in many ways that you don't see that a lot of sites are able to provide this type of content.
Yeah, definitely a wealth of information if you're taking part in those competitions and looking to build your teams there. Tell me a little bit more about the creating the Pros versus Joes competition. How'd that come about?
So it has its roots in something that was called the Fantasy Players Network, which was like a site of um, fantasy sites back in 2008. It was like KFFL. I mean, it's these old school sites, KFFL, the Huddle, and
Hmm.
like just a whole bunch of them. And what I did was I created an industry, uh, competition between, I think 24 of the sites in the network, and I set it up as best ball. So I set up two divisions of, okay, you know, 12 websites in one league and another 12 in another league, and but they're both, best ball leagues, and then we'll have like a champion, because most people were just doing, that there's industry leagues, but they're always like draft and manage them, and it's like, well, we're busy with like putting out content and doing stuff. Let's just draft and like let it play out. But then when I started playing with the FFPC, like I approached these guys and said, well, we could do the same thing here, but let's incorporate your high stakes players into this, and let's pit the industry guys against like the high stakes players. And it's kind of just evolved over time. This will be our 13th year this year, and it really kind of took off when Alex approached me. I was out in Vegas, drafting in the main event, and he said, like, next year what we want to do is just really kind of take it to the next level and offer up main event entries for every division winner for this thing, because up to that point it was just like bragging rights and like a trophy for the overall
Hmm.
winner. So yeah, it's kind of grown over time, and it's kind of like the premier sites, and it's real hard to get into, man. It's like we only got so many spots.
Hmm.
So yeah, so but That's like a big thing that we do as well.
Even before it was main event entries, I remember there were side bets among people. I haven't seen quite as much of that lately. But I
Nah.
know the first time I got in it, I think I was feeling gutsy and put up. I said anybody that I beat owed me 50. Anybody who beat me, I would pay 50, or whether I said that right or not. But yeah, I wanted to jump in and try to play the Joe's game with them. I think that was probably my best finish yet. I think I finished second place that year. I'm not sure I've gotten quite that high since then in my
Oh, that's
division.
good. Yeah, you got some money out of them. Yeah, that was before like the main event prizes. So
Mm-hmm.
people were just sort of putting up their own bounties. And it was kind of more personal then.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a good part of it. But it's ever since they I don't know, there's less of that sort of message board sort of engagement over there. So you don't really see players kind of interacting like they did back in it. It's kind of grown
Mm-hmm.
as much, so it's not quite as personal. But
Mm-hmm.
hey, people like the main event entries too, so I'm not complaining.
Oh yeah, I'm not complaining about that either. And plenty of us have connected with Joe's on Twitter and other places as well. And I always say Joe's kind of tongue in cheek, like guys who are Joe's, guys and females who are Joe's in this competition certainly know at least as much as most of the pros playing in that competition as well. So it's definitely a fun thing to do every season. We are months away, of course, from drafting the 2021 Pros versus Joe's leagues, but best ball drafting is already a month old on myffpc.com, live now on other sites as well. So with that in mind, Mojo, let's turn the page here and tap into your hyper focus on these drafts for all these formats, especially best ball this time of year. I know that you track best ball roster construction. Has optimal construction changed much year to year in the time that you have been studying that particular aspect?
I think like there's definitely like a sweet spot in terms of like the number of players you should be drafting at each position, but when you look back on it, it kind of deviates year to year. Kickers and defenses and quarterbacks, that's pretty consistent with like the optimal numbers, and most people know what they are. It's like three kickers, three defenses, and three quarterbacks. But what I've noticed is in the sweet spot for running backs and wide receivers, it'll differ by year to year. Like when you look back on like what was the best way to do it. For instance, in 2019, when I looked at it, 5 or 6 running backs was really the best way to approach it. So it was a good year for the running backs. Whereas last year, you needed, I think you needed 7 running backs to hit the sweet spot. So and that's because there was like hardly anybody got hurt in 2019 from the running backs, right? That was
Mm-hmm.
like a real good. And then last year was a disaster, like CMC and Barkley, and it was a whole mess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of stays with it, like you stay in the lane. And it's not like you want to be so rigid. It's like I must draft 6 or 7. You kind of just you, let the draft play out, and as long as you're not like straying off one way or the other too far, you're going to be in good shape, because that's just one component of overall best ball success. It's there's
Mm-hmm.
roster construction, there's getting good value, there's you can look at sometimes it's especially in the FFPC, it's when you draft the positions, right? Um, like it's been very one of the best things you can do is grab an elite tight end in the first round. I think one year that it's in the past 5 years it worked out negatively, because I think that was the year Gronk got hurt. It was just like a complete disaster. But every other year, it's like really one of the things that can boost your win rate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so but yeah, but it's for the most part, it's like, yeah, there's kind of a template you should follow just in terms of roster construction.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like, well, I mean, I know that early on when the best ball products first started coming out, people I think were taking, I think 2 defenses was one of the big changes, where early on, my friend Jason Phelps, who has done content for Draft Sharks in the past, was one of the first who really found that 3 team defenses was optimal there. And now that seems like the norm. It's kind of but just one of those signals of everybody getting more efficient in the draft space now. You were talking about how people know it's 3 defenses, it's 3 kickers, it's 3 quarterbacks, not necessarily rigidly that on every team, but those are the basic guidelines you start with. Is that how your personal draft strategy has gone? You've got like those spots locked in there, and then you just kind of mess around with tight end, wide receiver, running back, it sounds like?
Yeah, for the most part. It was Phelps. Was he the sports injury guy?
Yes.
He had a lot of success. I actually, what I'll do, and anybody can do this. Like I said, it's just tools that I use that are on the site. I got like winners data. Like you can actually go to these pages and like look at and see the teams of like just sort it by team name, and you can see like guys who have the same team name and their drafts. You can look at like what their approach was, and specifically recall looking at his.
Mm-hmm.
He was big on drafting um, quarterbacks that didn't get hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very valid. Like, just don't draft 3. Like he would just draft 2, but he would draft 2 very early that had historically a very a limited injury history.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So I'll kind of stick to sort of that template, and the time of year also influences the way you should approach it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like right now, I've the people who aren't drafting rookies, like a lot of people like say, "Oh, I'm going to wait till after the draft, or I want to wait till closer to the season." There's significant gains to be had right now by hopping in these drafts, and you don't have to be like a dynasty genius. You just go on, you pick off these rookies, you know, whether you have like extensive knowledge of them or not, and it's going to boost your win rates because they're going. So once the draft happens and they kind of move to their teams, the prices go up.
Right.
Like Chase Claypool was like going in the 26th round last year at this time. So you throw some darts and you pick up a few of these guys and kind of blend them in to the into that optimal roster construction. It's gonna jack up your rates. I specifically remember one team I drafted last year. I started off with McCaffrey and Todd Gurley, okay, which is a disaster. But I still ended
Mm-hmm.
up winning the league because I picked up Justin Jefferson and Chase Claypool on that
Mm-hmm.
same team. So, you know, the things out, that'll outweigh sort of any unknowns that you might experience, closer to the season.
Are you taking any Najee Harris and Travis Etienne, or are they going too early for your tastes in drafting rookies?
I haven't taken them yet. I mean, those are the top 2 guys off the board for rookies. I have picked up Javonte Williams in a couple leagues already because he's sort of and it might be more of a function of that was I needed a running back at that time because he's I think going in like in the 5th round.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was probably a lot of the drafts I've been taking 2 tight ends within the first 4 picks just because, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
grabbing those elite tight ends is if you're in the right spot. Like I wouldn't. Well, I sometimes maybe I could justify taking Travis Kelsey 1 overall, but right now I probably wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm drafting 4 or 5 and he's there, I'm snapping him up.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been getting a lot of I've swapped out Kittle and Waller in the first round, just kind of laying because I've seen this the data shows like grabbing elite tight ends in those first 2 rounds pays off, so I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, so that gets to the win rates point that we want to hit on here. First of all, I guess, so if anybody who's not familiar with win rates is just looking back on players from last year and like what percentage of winning rosters they wound up on, basically. So I guess, first of all, Darren, what is the value in looking back on last year's? I mean, somebody might say, well, who cares who won leagues last year? I'm trying to win this year. What's the value in looking at that data, projecting it forward?
Yeah, it's not going to really tell you who to draft this year necessarily. It's more or less a post-mortem of, okay, these are the players that were successful, but what it's an indicator of is these are the players who most outperform their ADP is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just look at the player win rate. You have to like consider where they were drafted in the context of that. And the more that a player outperforms his ADP, the more likely it is to lead to a higher win rate. So like I was saying, a guy like Chase Claypool, Justin Jefferson, those guys had fabulous win rates because they were selected, you know, 14th, 15th round. For Jefferson and Claypool was like in the 20th round. So if you get one of these, guys that just catapults you up the boards, I mean, they're going to end up with a high win rate. Deontay Johnson was another guy. He was drafted in the 8th or 10th round. The other thing it'll tell you is, you know, um, it can be very damaging to miss on early picks. So you had Saquon and Michael Thomas with win rates of less than 1%. So that draft capital you're spending on these premier players, if they don't at least return value on that, you're in trouble. Unless you make it up somewhere else. So that's kind of what it tells. It's like it doesn't tell you which players you need to draft, but it tells you the story of I need to hit on. So if I hit on some guys late and they really outproduce their ADP, that's kind of what I want to have to win my league.
Yeah,
Because you're not necessarily winning your league with your first and second round picks. It's what you're doing later in the draft.
Well, it's funny though that you certainly expect to see those guys that dramatically outperform ADP, but you'll also find those first round picks that really hit, like Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Travis Kelsey from this past season, Christian McCaffrey the year before. So, I mean, a lot of that's luck. I mean, who could have said that Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook would stay healthy while McCaffrey and Barkley would get hurt? You can't really say that. Maybe it's a signal to pass on somebody in round one who has more red flags than some other guys. Obviously, you can't project injury for everybody, but something to make you a little bit more wary. Travis Kelsey kind of had an not out of nowhere. He had an outlandish kind of productive season for even him last year. I wonder. I mean, I'm with you on drafting him in the first half of round one. I wonder, though, if the season that he had last year is kind of pushing him and George Kittle and Darren Waller up this year's draft board, in that people are trying to chase last year's Travis Kittle, last year's Darren Waller, and maybe overlooking that just a year before, Travis Kelsey was 7th among tight ends in win rate.
Yeah, it is kind of in general, and probably one of them's going to flop, so you have to be careful. That's why it's good to sort of diversify and not like plant your flag on, I'm just taking this guy every time, because then that's how you're going to get yourself into trouble. There's some guys out there who have, they make a name for themselves by fading certain players or targeting certain players, and then what happens is they're severely overweight or severely underweight in certain players, and you can have a great season, or like you may not even heard of what they did because they didn't have any teams like winning because they went too far to one extreme or the other. But Kelsey's been doing it. Yeah, he had a great year, but he's about as safe as they come.
Yeah,
they talk about his age, but
I don't think Travis Kelsey's going to bust for anybody unless he gets hurt. But I wonder if maybe he is kind of dragging Waller and George Kittle along with him. Are there a few maybe key players besides the guys already named that you think their win rates from last year might tell us something we didn't already know, or even just reinforce something that we already thought for 2021 drafting?
And
it's okay if nobody jumps out.
Yeah, like you were talking about Kamara. I mean, those guys really had to go bananas to end up with the high win rates. Devante Adams was another guy. I mean, he was just ridiculous. But it's really it's a high risk situation with a lot of those guys if they fail. And that's not even through no fault of your drafting. That's these guys got hurt. So it's
one guy that surprised me just because he missed 5 games but still had a pretty good win rate was Will Fuller. And I would think he missed 5 games. People who didn't draft him didn't because of this injury issue. He had that other strange 0 target game against Baltimore, yet he still was on all of these winning teams. I think it was it was a strong number. It was double-digit win rate. But the thing with him is those 11 active games, even including the Baltimore game, he produced wide receiver 8 points per game in PPR. So, we talk about the double-digit round guys, Chase Claypool, Justin Jefferson, but even somebody like Will Fuller, who was going in, I don't remember for sure at this point, but round 8, round 9, that kind of range, you can still find big upside there. A couple rounds ahead of that would have been Stephon Diggs. So it's not just, I got to take shots on all these late round guys who might do something, but I think that this guy should probably be going 2 rounds ahead of where he is. I'm going to take him because his upside is even beyond that. I think he would be a value in the 6th. I can get him in the 8th. I'm going to take some of him because, he could be a 4th rounder in value by the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing with best ball is you're going to bank those points. So if you get even a guy like he plays half the season, like Fuller kind of did, he like went so crazy, and your weekly points were, so they benefited so much. Like that carries you through the season. It's not like you get a one win. It's not equal weight. It's like it's weighted um, to like how much you outperformed that week against the rest of the league. So if you had like a 70-point lead over, the second place team for a given week, that's going to create buffer for you. Over the course of the year, it's not like you just get like, okay, oh, I'm 1-0 and then I'm 1-1. It's not like every win isn't equivalent. It's like it's weighted towards what you did that week. So that's where
Mm-hmm.
Fuller pays off. But that speaks to, you know, eyeing guys who are coming off injuries, who they've done it before, and if you can get them at a depressed price and maybe with a couple round discount, then those are guys you probably want to look at. There's other guys this year. I kind of look at that like guys coming off injury,
Mm-hmm.
that you can get later on that maybe fit that profile, like maybe Damian Williams
Mm-hmm.
or Tariq Cohen, or like it's just guys that are kind of, it's real. There hasn't been much about them, right? But if you snag them late, they're probably going to outperform their ADP.
I
Not that
think
they're going to like come back and be superstars
right.
necessarily, but they're cheap.
Yeah, I think Tariq Cohen is a strong pick right now, especially if you have started in more of like a zero RB or waiting on running back or whatever. Tariq Cohen, it has been talked about by nobody. He's going after a lot of rookies, even the ones that people aren't excited about. And yet, Tariq Cohen, as far as I can tell, is going to be a significant part of the Chicago backfield again. And if he's, I don't know, if he's not there for some reason, don't have his contract in front of me, but last time I looked at his contract, I think he's a pretty good bet to stick around there. And he was half of that backfield before. He led the receiving stuff. So there are some solid weeks at least, and probably some strong weeks coming from Tariq Cohen, and you can get him late in the double-digit rounds. Jameson Crowder was another wideout that jumped out to me last year, and he also missed some games. And Will Fuller, we look at and we know that he's the boom bust type. That's just his style of play. Jameson Crowder, you wouldn't think of that way. He's more of a short range guy, but that upside can be volume instead of just style of play. It doesn't have to be deep balls. It can be, this guy can get 15 targets in any given game. So Jameson Crowder, even though he missed time and even though he was awesome early and less awesome later, he was somebody who delivered strong value at his draft day prices.
Yeah, people were expecting like Brashad Perryman and Denzel Mims to kind of, and Chris Herndon was a disaster. Like that's all you heard about last year was like, oh, Chris Herndon, draft Chris Herndon, and then that was like
Right.
he killed you, because it didn't pan out. But Crowder was pretty consistent. I'm looking at like, yeah, he missed a few games early on, and then well, he was up and down. But that's the type of
Mm-hmm.
guy you want for best ball.
Mm-hmm.
If you let the optimizer do the work. You build the solid roster construction. You get guys who have these profiles of being able to like, you know, hit a ceiling and really perform at a certain week. And it just the optimizers does the work for you, and it puts these players together. And you're winning the league at the end of the year if you get enough of them.
Right. So let's go back to tight ends. And we talked about Travis Kelsey, George Kittle, Darren Waller. Kelsey, of course, is a little earlier even than he was already in FFPC drafts. And anybody who's not familiar, but everybody should be at this point, FFPC is 1.5 PPR for tight ends versus 1 point PPR for everybody else. Travis Kelsey going earlier, obviously no problem with that. All three of these guys, though, are among the top 13 overall in ADP. George Kittle, Darren Waller. It sounds like, though, Darren, you're taking shares of obviously Kelsey, but also Kittle and Waller at their prices, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've drafted a elite tight end in every draft so far. Well, not that I was in a $5 best ball and then I drafted Dalvin Cook there. But other than that, I've been getting picks late at the end of the first round. So I've been grabbing one or the other. sort of in that 10, 11, 12 spot. I'm coming away with one because the elite running backs are sort of gone, and there you're
Yeah.
going to pick between, that's where the running back gets a little iffy with like, Nick Chubb and Cam Akers. And I just, at that point, I feel more comfortable taking the elite tight end because I know what it does for you. And then having that in your back pocket, you can really sort of pick off value for quite a while in the draft and then hit the tight ends again later on. So while everybody else is then scrambling for those middle tier tight ends, you're grabbing like high producing wide receivers, and running back thins out pretty quick, but I'm usually loading up on wide receivers after that with that elite tight end in my back pocket.
And especially if it's a 28 round FFPC draft, you just kind of load up on running backs, and you figure that you'll find one or two guys that hit pretty well. I one early best ball draft, I think it was the second one I did. Darren Waller went like 7th overall, and I was like, what is Darren Waller doing there? But the more time that I've spent on it, I'm not sure I'm taking him that early because we still got Devante Adams, Tyreek Hill on the board. But as soon as we get around that 1-2 turn, and the guys you're talking about, like, even Nick Chubb, Ezekiel Elliott are off the board, and we're into those second-year running backs in round 2. I feel pretty good about Darren Waller in that early part of round 2. George Kittle, maybe, I think, I don't know. I guess I'm still getting comfy with George Kittle versus Darren Waller because I haven't done my team projections yet, so I don't really know exactly what I expect from them versus each other. Kittle, I think, has a lot more competition all of a sudden with Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel than he did, whereas Darren Waller, I'm not sure where that competition is going just yet, so I wonder if he's the safer target bet. Do you have a favorite between Kittle and Waller right now, or are they pretty even and you're just getting both?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've been getting 10, 11, 12, and I've just alternated them to just what I took Kittle in one at 10, and then the next one I took Waller in the other. The thing with Waller is it's not so much him I'm worried about. It's there's a little bit of uncertainty around that quarterback position in Las Vegas. You keep hearing like, rumors of Carr, and they seem like, oh, well, Mariota might be the guy that goes, but now you're hearing like Russell Wilson wants to go there. So, but if you look at the stats last year, Waller had more targets even than Travis Kelsey. So, I mean, the volume is there for sure. But it's not necessarily him that I'm worried about. It's his car. Now Kittle plays a little reckless and he gets hurt. That's the concern with him. But he's a beast. If he could stay healthy for all 16 games, that would be great.
Yeah.
But so you kind of split the difference, and you kind of mix it up. And Mark Andrews is cheaper this year. I've been grabbing him in the 4th round. I think he's kind of like he's like in a tier by himself right now. You got Kittle, Kelsey, and Waller. Then you got Andrews, and then the guys after them is Hawkinson and Fant. I mean, I'm not really in on Hawkinson in like the 4th or the early 5th round where he's going. I'm just that's Detroit's. It's I don't know. I'm not totally sold on it, so I'm skipping him. Then Fant and Goddard. I have questions about. Like, I mean, I pretty watch every Eagles game. It's like, well, when did this guy ever dominate a game? And he's consistent, but I'm liking that tier after them. Gesicki, Logan Thomas, Tunyon, and Ingram is kind of like that sweet spot that I've been picking up guys, sort of after that first elite tight end that I'm grabbing.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's been like for me too. If I don't take one of those top 3 guys, I'm not in a hurry for the next group. I haven't gotten to Mark Andrews yet, but I'm okay with him in round 4. I'm with you on Hawkinson in that if he slides past ADP, I'll take a shot on him because I think he has a chance to be a high target guy in Detroit because there's not a whole lot going for him at this point, but it's certainly not anything I'm excited about. I'm not reaching for anything Detroit. But then beyond that, I mean, how much difference is there between Evan Ingram and Noah Fant or Dallas Goedert in terms of upside? And if we're talking about a couple rounds of difference, I'm fine with waiting on Evan Ingram. And I even think there's plenty of value outside of the top 12, including some very late tight ends that we're going to get to in a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of names out there. I mean, it's not that it's deep. For best ball, I think it's a somewhat attractive pool of players that have a lot of potential. If
Right.
this is just redraft, then the guys that like you're not going to know what you're going to get week to week, and it's a little bit of a tougher. If I'm going to go say, okay, let me grab who's a guy that's like Ebron or Jarwin. Everybody seems to be thinking Jarwin's going to come back 100%. I'm not so sure. Um, I'll take some Dalton Schultz later. He's going in like in the 20th round. Just as that's like my fourth tight end. So that's what I would be doing there. So, but like I said, with best ball, the optimizer is going to do the work for you. You don't have guys who can like have spike weeks and just sort of target them.
Mm-hmm. Now, the first two rounds are still running back heavy like last year. Are there anywhere in there that you see potential landmines, whether it be late in round one or round two? Obviously, it kind of ties into what we were talking about with the tight ends in that range.
Um,
Like, are there specific players or like a pool of players among those running backs in the first two rounds that you're queasy about and passing on, or are you mixing them in?
I let me see. Gonna look at a board that was just completed here. Aaron Jones,
It's a tough time to take him in round two because we don't know. We have no idea where he's landing.
yeah. So that's kind of an iffy pick if you're going to go running back there. J.K. Dobbins,
Yeah.
that seems like pretty expensive. I don't know that he's not going to be the bell cow necessarily. You still got some other faces there.
He's a no for me in round two, primarily because I don't see a path to catching 50 balls, and he's also not going to carry 270 times like you're saying. So I don't know about a 220 carry 35 catch guy. Obviously, there's upside beyond that, but yeah, Dobbins is a no for me in round two.
Yeah, and Akers, well, I guess you're working on the assumption like his late season run is just going to continue, and then I think there was some talk today from Sean McVay saying that they were going to throw him the ball. So I don't think he's going anywhere. Like I've seen him in the first round even. Swift, I like Swift. Eckler he's a safe pick, I guess. I think he's got a pretty high floor. So, but yeah, so and nothing really beyond that. There's like Metcalf in the second round. So what thing that struck me was Metcalf is going in the second round, and Tyler Lockett's going in the seventh round.
Yeah.
But I was like, I've been picking up a lot of Lockett because when I compared what they did side by side, I was like, well, Lockett didn't do that much worse than when Metcalf when you look at it at the end of the day. So
Yeah, I mean, it was
Metcalf's
very
expensive.
up and down. He had a few spike weeks, but overall, their numbers were not very far apart. And it surprises me that Metcalf would go in round two, but Russell Wilson would be. He's like QB8, QB9 range right now. He's certainly not going that high. If I took Metcalf in round two or early round three, for that matter, I think I would be reaching for Russell Wilson, because if I'm taking Metcalf that high, I'm expecting him to have a boom season, and I don't see how that's happening without at least some astronomical weeks from Russell Wilson, if not an overall, top five season.
Right, and that gets you into like the stacking. That's like another strategy that you can employ. So if you do go Metcalf, then you can tie Russell Wilson to him, and especially you see here's the thing with the ADP. I think one of the things you asked about was like, what are you seeing about ADP? The thing is like everybody ADP is out there. It's like baked in the draft room. Like you have to go out of your way now to like screw up a draft
Mm-hmm.
because it's sorted. It's telling you who to pick essentially, right? So, but what you can do is I'll use that to my advantage because I know when other people are gonna pick players. So if I'm targeting certain guys, I'm like, okay, well I know I can get this guy 100% of the time. I'll just grab him like a half a round or a round earlier than when the ADP is. And if I have a certain preference for a guy like that, then he's going to be there for me every time. So I kind of use ADP sometimes in the reverse sense. Um, but yeah, so and that's how you can build stacks. Like if you want to build a certain stack, you can
Mm-hmm.
certainly say, okay, I'll take Mahomes in the second round, and then I can get. Well, that's actually a tough stack. That's a bad example. But some of the like Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews, you could probably
Uh-huh.
easily tie them together. Last year it was much harder to do.
Well, so I mean, speaking of Mahomes, if you take Tariq Hill in round one, I feel like Patrick Mahomes is close to an auto pick in round three. At the very least, if he gets to you in round four, I don't think you pass on him. And I was in a 10 team best ball tournament draft on drafters earlier today, and somebody took Tyreek Hill in round 1, passed on Patrick Mahomes in round 4 for James Robinson. Those are the kind of mistakes that surprise me, I think, at this point.
Yeah, if you're doing like a tournament style setting, then that's really like you want to sort of pay more attention to stacks. I don't necessarily go into these sort of self-contained leagues looking to stack guys.
Mm-hmm.
If it presents itself as an opportunity as I'm going through, then yeah, I'll see it's happening, and then I'll snag it. But I'm not going to sort of like alter my approach. Like I need to get a stack because, like I said, there's like so many strategies you need to have in your tool belt, and you just as the draft evolves, you sort of like pick up on all of these different strategies that can increase your win rate along the way. So you don't, it's a blend of all of them. And if you've been doing this long enough, it's kind of like muscle memory to you, and that's why we're drafting early right now. It's
Right.
so we can get a handle on the player values and see how the boards are sort of coming into play. And it's going to change. The first big change is when free agency hits, and then there'll be a massive shift in player values. Then after the draft is the next one.
Yeah, these drafts are our Tua workouts while Justin Herbert's out playing golf.
Yeah, exactly. We're just getting warmed up here.
We talked about the rookie running backs earlier. How are you feeling about rookie wide receivers so far?
I have been drafting quite a lot of them. I really like grabbing these guys.
They don't seem to be going at crazy prices.
No, they well, I took a look, and I guess last year it was CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy were the first two rookie wide receivers to go off the board. And I think this year, let's see, who do we got?
Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith.
Yeah, and they're basically going off around the same time. So, that initial kickoff of the rookie wide receivers is there. So I haven't been drafting those guys. I've been getting back to like the Claypool example. Like I want these guys and like Ayuk. I want these guys who are just going to come out of nowhere late in the season, and I want to have like an inventory of these guys on my teams that cost me nothing during the draft, but can really just sort of take over and propel you at the end of the season, or sometimes even at the end. Like they'll come. Like remember what Odell Beckham? Like that was like the ultimate example. He was like 17th, 18th round pick, and then he was like a complete stud all year long. So rather than I'll invest my earlier draft capital into some of the more established players that I know what I'm getting, and then just like really throw darts in the second half of the draft. And I've done if one of the things we have on the site, I have a best ball analysis, and one of the analyses that I do is I look at specifically best ball teams drafted prior to the NFL draft, and I see like, well, based upon how many rookies a team owned on their best ball team, like what was the win rate? The guys who draft 0 or 1 rookies, it's terrible. It's like under 5%. It's like really bad. And then as you go from like 3 up to about 6 or 7 rookies, it's like a bell curve. Like that the win rate starts to go up and then it starts to tail off a little bit. So I've been trying to snag 4 or 5 rookies in every draft that I've done so far.
What about Kyle Pitts? Is he in that mix, the rookie tight end?
He's expensive. I mean, I was trying to do a comp for him, and I was like, well, I guess Fant and Hawkinson a couple years ago was the closest thing I could think of, but they were going like in the 13th, 14th round. Pitts is going in like the 8th round. And also when you take like you don't know what team he's going to be on, and take into consideration that it's rookie tight ends don't have a great history of producing, so I think it's going to be dependent upon like where he lands, but it's too expensive for me right now to be drafting him.
Yeah, that's been my feeling on Pitts as well. I mean, he's going in the same range as Evan Engram. Hayden Hurst is behind him, so I don't see the opportunity cost in going for him.
Yeah, I don't even know where he would land to justify that. Like, what situation is he going to get into that he's going to like pay off for that price?
Right, and even if he does land in that situation, then he's later going to be going 8th or whatever, and it's still going to be too early. So I don't know. I don't see. Anything's possible, but you'd have to be betting, I think, at this point that he has top 6 upside for the price to make sense, I think.
Right. So we'll see
Um,
on that.
so the quarterbacks are pushing up the board. They're starting a little bit later than they were last year. Everybody was excited about Lamar Jackson, and then Patrick Mahomes was not far behind. But now they're starting a little bit later. But that next group is pushing up further after the scores that we had this past season from quarterbacks. Are you making sure to grab one of those QBs that are off the board? Oftentimes by the end of round 6, there's like 9 of them going in that range.
Yeah, I guess there's more uncertainty than usual right now about a lot of the quarterback situations, so it's just kind of inflating the price overall, and there's like this rush, there's like this, this flight to safety,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of those, they're not even elite guys, but there's a certainty, and knowing in best ball you need to have 2 or 3 of them. People are grabbing some of those safe plays. And yeah, I've been doing it. I've drafted Lamar. I mean, it's not like they're not going in the second round. I mean, so I got like Lamar like in the 4th round,
Mm-hmm.
the 5th round even, and then whoever else is there. I like to grab at least one surefire lock at quarterback, and then see how the draft goes. Like, are they going to keep picking them off, or are they going to like pull back, and are they going to fall? Like I was in this one of these $5 best ball slims, and I got 2 leagues going right now. So I get Tannehill in the 7th round in my $35 league, and I just picked off Tannehill in the 11th round in this best ball slim. So it's kind of a draft to draft thing, but
Uh-huh.
then I'm wondering like with these $5 drafts, like I'm kind of like keeping an eye on like what these guys are doing, like because is it the same profile of FFPC player that's drafting in a 35 versus who's drafting in a 5, and I haven't quite figured that out yet. But I'm looking at that, and I'm wondering if I need this. I may end up splitting out ADP just for these $5 drafts if things get like nutty,
I'll be
because
curious to see what you find because I would not be surprised if it's a different group. I'm sure that $5 drafts draw in more casual players, and I mean I'm not a high dollar player like a lot of FFPC guys, but there might be a number of them that are like $5. Why would I even bother wasting my time on that?
yeah, I mean there's the price for your time. But yeah, I haven't seen anything stupid like quarterbacks going in the 1st round. But
Mm-hmm.
they've only been out for 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
These file address, but I'm gonna keep an eye on that and see like what's going on in these if we need to do something about the ADP. I don't want it polluting sort of like
Right. Yeah.
the regular ADP.
So let's look later in the draft where we can get some of those guys that finish the season with the outlandish win rates. And are there any particular players or even pools of players that you find yourself gravitating towards, beyond the rookies that you already talked about, grabbing a few of those in the later rounds? Any veterans, I guess, that you're going to more often as high upside targets later in drafts?
Well, let me look. One of the things we have on the site is for the subscribers. There's this uh, I call it a player share report. So in for all the drafts that you've done, what we'll do is we'll calculate the stats for ownership of the players. And FFPC does this, I think, as well. But we kind of even break it out into the contest type. So
Mm-hmm.
if you did 50 drafts, then you can see like what's my player ownership percentage that I did in best ball versus football guys versus super flex or dynasty. So I'm looking at that right now for what I've done, and it looks now. If you want later guys, um, who went- well, I'm a Penn State homer apparently because I got Pat Fryermuth up here in multiple drafts. Jared Cook, I've been picking off. He's been going really late, and I know he's a free agent, but um, I think it, the team brings him in. It's specifically for a very significant pass catching role.
Uh-huh.
So I've been grabbing a lot of Jared Cook. Uh, who else? Damian Williams. I've been grabbing late. Here's one, Philly one, Travis Fulgham. So it's kind of playing out like I thought it would. They got rid of Deshaun Jackson. Alshon Jeffrey's been toast, for like over a year. So really, all they have now is Rager and Fulgham, and they'll probably bring somebody else in. But those guys are super cheap,
Hmm.
so I've been picking up those guys as well.
Yeah, I just took my first Travis Fulgham share earlier today on the same team as Jalen Reagor, so I'll be curious to see how things play out there. Some of the other guys that I like, you mentioned Chris Herndon earlier. He's a nice little post hype guy to make a bet on right now because Adam Gase is gone, and that's been good for people in the past. The question of who his quarterback will be, remains to be answered, but it might not matter if he's still on a Jets team. It doesn't have a whole lot of targets. He's going very late now, so you can get him outside the top 24. Gerald Everett, I think it's a good time to buy him before he becomes a free agent. He'll land somewhere that wants him most likely, and he has pass catching talent. And then Adam Troutman, I think, is a guy who's set up to benefit if the Saints don't bring back Jared Cook, and their cap situation certainly suggests that they're likely to move on from him. But there's a second-year guy that's not being drafted too high in a situation that I think people are apprehensive of, with Drew Brees expected to retire at this point.
Yeah, I mean, those are some good names. And Herndon fits the profile of what we were talking about later. A guy who, has been really quiet, but he has the skill, so you can grab him now, and he'll probably rise up in drafts as we get closer to the season.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but not to the degree of the craziness that we had last year. I don't even remember how high he went, like probably sixth, seventh round, or he might even been going at that early. I don't remember.
Yeah, he got into
Um,
high tight end two territory at one point.
yeah, it's like every tout was like, "Oh, Chris Herndon's the guy." It's like,
Well,
I got burned a little bit too, but I wasn't like overweight on him, but he
never
was.
never get excited about something that Adam Gase says about a player. I,
Yeah,
One late stack that I've found myself targeting a little bit is you already talked up a Giants receiver, and really, when there are a couple of Philly guys get on a podcast, we shouldn't be talking up Giants. But Daniel Jones and Darius Slayton, I think both have some post hype appeal to them this year. I was out on both of them last year because they were too expensive in an iffy offense, and I still don't believe in that offense. But Daniel Jones is sitting in the bottom of QB2 territory now after he was living on that QB1 fringe last year. If he goes off, even if it's for a game or two, a few big games this season, I think he's going to bring Darius Slayton with him, who had those big games as a rookie, didn't do a whole lot last year. He's wide receiver 65 in FFPC drafts right now. So you're basically paying nothing for this tandem that had like 2 to 3 week winning performances together in 2019.
yeah, cheap stack, and the price is depressed on Jones. I mean, he didn't have that great a year, but if he can pick it up a little, what he had over 400 rushing yards here, so he's going to do it with his legs as well, and if Ingram is healthy, then that's definitely going to help too. So yeah, he's probably one of the he's the job is secure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's like a cheap guy you can get that's kind of in that realm of safe place for quarterbacks. So yeah,
Where he fits nicely, I think, is if you don't get one of those top 9 quarterbacks and you're just behind that, and you get, let's say, Tom Brady, Matt Ryan, and then Daniel Jones is your third. That's not an exciting group, but you can definitely get 15 QB1 weeks out of that trio of quarterbacks.
right. And if you get guys like you're mentioning your the associate, the sports injury doctor or whatever he was, he, like I said, he would just draft 2, but he would take 2 like really safe
Mm-hmm.
guys that weren't injury prone, and a guy that I like that really fits in that profile is Kirk Cousins. I mean, that guy. When's the last time he was hurt? Like it was like 2015, or it was like years and years ago, and he's solid. I mean, you can get him sort of he's like, where is he at right now? Let's see, like 9 or 10. I'd have to look at the ADP. Um, Kirk Cousins right now is QB 17.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, for a guy that's going to be rock solid for you. So
Yeah, but he's about to get traded to the 49ers for a first round pick. Didn't you see? Peter King. Obviously, that move's coming.
yeah, we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, so cheap stacks. Yeah, we don't like the Giants, but there's production there to be had rather than paying up. Like you're talking about the Chiefs like Mahomes and Hill.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it, but it's going to cost you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my favorite team in fantasy is my own team, so I don't have to worry about team allegiances here.
Yeah, that's it.
He is at Fantasy Mojo on Twitter. His site is fantasymojo.com. You're going to want to check it out, especially if you're competing in FFPC formats. Darren, thanks very much for joining me tonight and sharing your insights.
Hey, no problem, man.
That's going to do it for this edition of the podcast. Head over to draftsharks.com now. You can check out my reviews of QB and running back scoring from last season. Wide receivers, tight ends, IDPs will follow soon. Early March, you will find our initial 2021 projections, as well as our live MVP draft board. So make sure you're an insider so you can get access there. We are also on Twitter. We are at DraftSharks. I am at SchaufDS. That's SCHAUF. For Darren Armani, as well as the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schauf saying thanks so much for swimming with us.